The Prince of Denmark's March, that very popular wedding piece by Jeremiah Clarke. When we're at a larger instrument, there are various ways we can register this. This piece essentially has three registrational elements. There's a solo, often played on the trumpet. There's an accompaniment for that solo that should balance well. And then there's a tutti section, as if it's being played by the whole orchestra. When we have three manuals, we can put those three elements onto each manual. So on this organ, that's going to work best if we take the trumpet available to us on the swell, the cornopian. We also have a trumpet on the grate. It's called a posauna here, but we can look at that later. If we use this method of one part on each manual, we'll take the cornopian on the swell. We need to combine that with an 8-foot stop. We'll take the open diapason to give it some volume, some roundness, and we'll also take the principal 4-foot to give it a bright sound. Without the 4-foot, it might also work, but I think as it's relatively soft, we're going to need that little extra boost of the 4-foot principal. For the accompaniment, let's look at the positif. We can take the open diapason 8-foot. As we have a 4-foot in the solo, we'll also take a 4-foot in the accompaniment, the Gemshorn. Then we need a tutti section. That works best on the grate. So we'll take an open diapason 8-foot. That's quite a strong stop on this organ. We can take the principal 4-foot. We can take the principal 2-foot. And if we're daring, we can take the mixture as well. So now we've got our three elements. We need a pedal registration. It's very important that the pedal doesn't overpower the solo. So we'll take the wood on 16-foot. Maybe try with the violoncello, and also a 4-foot, as we have a 4-foot in every manual so far. Let's see how that balances. So we heard the solo with the accompaniment, followed by the tutti section. You might have noticed in the tutti section the pedal was a little bit on the weak side, because that was chosen to balance the solo part. So when we go to the tutti section, we really need to increase the pedal. There are various ways we can do that. We can pull more pedal stops. Very straightforward way is we're playing on the grate, so we can add the grate to pedal. And on this organ, we've got a button that'll do that. There's a button underneath the grate manual called grate to pedal. So we need to add that between the solo sections and the tutti ones. Let's try that. Balance is much better. The only thing is we have to have a hand free to press that button. That sometimes needs a little bit of practice. Another way of playing this piece, if we find that maybe not quite appropriate for the occasion, after all that cornopian is a little bit on the soft side and we've got a trumpet on the grate that's more powerful, maybe we want to use that. If we do that, we've got to find out a way of creating a tutti effect, probably also on the grate, because the other manuals are just a little bit less prominent, and if it's a wedding, a joyous occasion, maybe lots of people in the church, we want to use the full organ for those tutti places. So we have a general cancel on this organ that'll put back all the stops, so we start on a clean sheet. We can listen to that trumpet on the grate. Here it is. quite a solo stop. I think will be very effective for this piece. Let's combine that with an 8-foot. Doesn't need to be such a strong 8-foot because the trumpet's already quite powerful by itself. Let's see how that is. We'll add a 4-foot, see does that work? I think that's a little bit overpowering. It doesn't blend so well with the trumpet. We then need to find an accompaniment. Let's look at the swell, our second biggest division on this organ. We will need, I'm sure, an open diapason 8-foot, principal 2-foot, a principal 4-foot, possibly also a 2-foot. Clearly a solo and an accompaniment in the background. For the pedal, we'll need a 16-foot, of course, violoncello, because I think the principal will possibly be too loud, but we can check that in a minute, and we'll take a 4-foot. We might well need the principal 8-foot in the pedal. Let's see, is that going to work? I think that strong trumpet is well able to take that amount of support in the pedal. Now we have a solo and accompaniment. We need to work out how we're going to do our tutti. That could involve changing quite a number of stops. That would be a lot of work to do with the hands and would more than likely disturb the flow of the music. On this organ we have a piston system, a combination memory system, so we can save that combination that we've chosen on one of the combination buttons. I'm going to take combination 1, so I'm going to press set, hold set down, and simultaneously press the first combination button. Now that'll be saved, and that's how we're going to begin the piece. Now let's look for our tutti section. I suggest on the grate. We don't want the trumpet anymore, as that's our solo. This is the orchestra playing without the soloist. We'll take the open diapason 8-foot, the principal 4-foot, principal 2-foot, and the mixture to give us a plenum or full organ sound. We're going to need a pedal that's going to balance that. We could take the grate to pedal. That will be almost sure to balance well. We could also use some of our other stops. We could see, could we even take the trombone 16-foot, a strong reed stop in the pedal. Let's see how that sounds. That will probably give us our desired effect for a joyous wedding ceremony. We need to save that combination so that we can recall it quickly later. So I'm going to use the second general piston. Again, I'm going to press set, followed by the second button, and that should be saved. So we can go back to our first combination. There we go. And once we get to the tutti section, we can press button number 2. As we have the possibility on this organ to save as many combinations as we like, we could maybe add some variation later in the piece. So if we go to the second part, or the middle section of this piece, we could explore some other sounds. I've already saved a combination. on the third level, and it involves using the corno di bassetto as if it was maybe an orchestral instrument, maybe a pair of them doing a little duet in the middle of this piece. I've also got an accompaniment set up on the swell, 8, 4 and 2, and I have a louder 8, 4 and 2 on the grate. So I can use that in the middle section to add a little bit of interest. Then at the end of the piece, I can use the next combination to give a very full tutti sound to finish it off. So this is combination number 3. There are various options of how we can move from one general combination onto the next. I was using the buttons 1, 2, 3 and 4 consecutively. We can also press the next button under the grate if that suits us better, so that will always advance onto the next combination step by step. If we make a mistake or we want to go back, we can press the previous button. The other option is to press the advance pedal on the right of the swell pedal. So we need to get used to that position there and be able to do that without having to look. Bit like we learn where the individual notes on the pedal board are, we can also learn where the pedal pistons are. So if we're busy with our hands, we've got quite a lot to do, it might be easier to advance with the pedal. If you're doing something very complicated, you can always get an assistant to help, and they can either press these buttons here or the next button. The other thing that's useful to know on a combination system is that there's a means of locking it on most organs, not on all. Sometimes you have to turn a key and then you press a lock button, and that means that those combinations can't be changed until the unlock is pressed.